What's going on, truckers? Welcome back to Young Diesel Trucking Reacts. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell because today we're diving into something that could change everything for drivers across America. And trust me, what I'm about to show you is going to shock you. You think you know what's happening with English language proficiency enforcement? You think you understand the real numbers? Well, buckle up because the data I've uncovered tells a completely different story than what you've been hearing on the CB radio or reading in the trucking forums. Before we get into this bombshell, let me ask you something. Have you been pulled into a DOT inspection lately? Have you noticed anything different? More aggressive questioning? More paperwork scrutiny? Well, there's a reason for that, and it's bigger than most drivers realize. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has been tracking something quietly, something they don't want to advertise too loudly, and when I dug into their data, what I found made my jaw drop. We're talking about a systematic change in how ELP violations are being handled, and it's happening right under our noses. Let me paint you a picture. It's June in Wyoming, a state known for wide open roads and generally trucker-friendly enforcement. But something strange happened in June that should have every driver paying attention. ELP violations became the fifth most common violation in the entire state. The fifth most common in Wyoming. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so what? Violations happen. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite the law clearly stating that ELP violations should result in out-of-service orders, Wyoming didn't specify whether any of these violations actually resulted in trucks being parked. That's not normal, folks. That's not how DOT typically operates. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Shan Duffy is testifying before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and what he's saying should make every owner, operator, and fleet driver sit up and take notice. He's telling Congress that ELP enforcement depends entirely on state partners. Some states are already going full throttle with enforcement, while others are dragging their feet. But here's the kicker. He wouldn't name which states are which. Think about that for a second. You could be running the same route you've been running for years, same cargo, same schedule, but depending on which state you're in, your risk of getting parked could be completely different. It's like playing Russian roulette with your livelihood, but the real story, the story that should have every trucker in America concerned, comes from the FMCSA data itself. And when I started analyzing this data, I realized we're not just looking at random enforcement variations. We're looking at a coordinated escalation that started on a very specific date, June 25th. Remember that date because it changed everything. Before June 25th, ELP violations were being written, sure, but the enforcement was scattered, inconsistent. It was like DOT was testing the waters, seeing how drivers and companies would react. But on June 25th, something flipped. That was the official enforcement start date, and the numbers tell a story that should terrify anyone who makes their living behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. From June 1st through June 30th, 3,724 ELP violations were issued nationwide. Now, that sounds like a lot, but here's what's really crazy. In just the first 2 weeks of July, from July 1st through July 14th, 2,669 violations were issued. Do the math with me here. June had 30 days. July data covers only 14 days. The daily average in July was significantly higher than June, but violations are just part of the story. The real indicator of how serious this enforcement has become is the out-of-service orders. This is where trucks get parked, where drivers lose money, where schedules get destroyed. In June, 192 out-of-service orders were issued for ELP violations. But here's something that should make your blood run cold. In just the first half of July, 649 out-of-service orders were issued. That's more than triple the monthly rate in just 2 weeks. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Maybe June numbers were low because enforcement hadn't really started yet. But that's not the whole story. Because when you dig deeper into the data, when you look at what's really happening, the picture becomes even more disturbing. There's something called border zone carriers. These are trucking operations that work near the U.S. borders, primarily with Mexico and Canada. Here's where the plot thickens. Border zone carriers can receive ELP violations, but they're exempt from getting out of service orders. They get a free pass. Now, why does this matter? Because when these border zone carriers are included in the overall statistics, it makes the enforcement look less severe than it actually is. It's like having a rigged game where some players can't lose, making the overall win-loss record look more balanced than reality. But when you remove the border zone carriers from the data, when you look at what's happening to regular truckers like you and me, the numbers become absolutely terrifying. In June, when you account for the border zone exemption, only about 5% of ELP violations resulted in out-of-service orders. That sounds manageable, right? You might think, okay, I'll take my chances. Maybe I'll just get a warning. But in July, after removing the border zone carriers from the calculation, over 45% of ELP violations resulted in out-of-service orders. 45%. That means if you get pulled over for an ELP violation in July, there's almost a 50-50 chance your truck is getting parked. This isn't just a statistical anomaly. This isn't just states getting their act together. This is a systematic ramping up of enforcement that's designed to fundamentally change how the trucking industry operates. Think about what this means for your business, for your family, for your ability to make a living. You could be running a load on time, doing everything right, but if your English proficiency gets questioned and the officer determines it's not adequate, there's nearly a 50% chance you're getting parked on the spot. And here's the most concerning part. Nobody is talking about which states are being aggressive and which ones aren't. Remember what Shan Duffy said? Some states are enforcing, some aren't, but he wouldn't say which ones. This creates a situation where drivers are operating blind. You might be planning a route through states where enforcement is minimal, or you might unknowingly be driving straight into enforcement hot zones. It's like navigating a minefield without a map. The data suggests we're in what I'm calling a training and adaptation period for enforcement officers. They're getting more confident, more consistent, and more aggressive as they gain experience with the new regulations. This means the enforcement trend is only going to get worse, not better. What we're seeing is the government's long-term strategy playing out exactly as designed. Start with minimal enforcement to avoid industry pushback, then gradually increase enforcement until it becomes the new normal. By the time the industry realizes what's happening, it's too late to effectively resist. The regional analysis is going to be crucial for drivers who want to survive this enforcement wave. Some states are clearly going to be more dangerous than others. Some routes are going to carry significantly higher risk than others. But right now we're all flying blind because the government isn't releasing state-by-state breakdown data. This creates a competitive disadvantage for smaller operators and owner-operators who don't have the resources to track enforcement patterns across different states. Large fleets with legal teams and compliance departments will figure out the enforcement patterns quickly and adjust their operations accordingly. But the independent driver, they're going to be left holding the bag. What's particularly insidious about this whole situation is how the exemption for border zone carriers skews the public perception of enforcement severity. When advocacy groups or industry publications report on ELP enforcement, they're using the overall numbers that include these exempt carriers. This makes the enforcement look much more reasonable and measured than it actually is for the average trucker. It's a classic government strategy. Implement a policy that sounds reasonable on paper, but structure the reporting in a way that hides the true impact on the people most affected by it. The question every driver needs to ask themselves is this: are you prepared for a world where nearly half of all ELP violations result in your truck being parked? Are you prepared for enforcement that varies dramatically from state to state, but with no way to know which states are aggressive until it's too late? Because based on this data, that's exactly where we're headed. The July numbers aren't an anomaly. They're not a temporary spike while officers get trained. They represent the new normal. This is what ELP enforcement is going to look like going forward, and it's only going to get more severe as more states come online with aggressive enforcement. What makes this situation even more dangerous is the apparent coordination between federal and state authorities. This isn't random. This isn't states independently deciding to crack down. This is a coordinated effort to fundamentally change how the trucking industry operates, and they're doing it gradually to minimize resistance. The timing of the June 25th enforcement start date wasn't arbitrary. It was designed to give the appearance of a gradual rollout while actually implementing a dramatic shift in enforcement philosophy. And based on the July numbers, that shift is working exactly as intended. For drivers watching this video, the message is clear. The game has changed. The old rules, the old expectations about how DI enforcement works, they don't apply anymore. We're entering a new era where language proficiency violations carry real, immediate consequences for your ability to work. And the most disturbing part, this is just the beginning. If the trend continues, we could see enforcement rates climb even higher in the coming months. What happens when 60%, 70%, or even 80% of ELP violations result in out-of-service orders? The data is clear, the trend is unmistakable, and the implications are terrifying. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That's all for today's video, truckers. If this information opened your eyes to what's really happening with ELP enforcement, smash that like button and share this video with every driver you know. They need to see this data. They need to understand what's coming. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I'll be continuing to track this story as more data becomes available. We need to stay informed. We need to stay ahead of these enforcement trends, and we need to support each other as the industry navigates these dangerous waters. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open, and remember, the only way we survive this is by staying informed and sticking together.